When Keanu Reeves arrived at his new villa, he witnessed a disturbing scene of his wealthy neighbor's cruel treatment toward his helpless dog. However, the entitled rich man had no idea that Keanu Reeves was his new neighbor, and unlike many others, he was not the kind of person to look away. The sleek black car glided through the streets of the luxurious Silverwood neighborhood, its tinted windows reflecting the pristine lawns and stately homes that lined the way. Inside, Keanu Reeves sat in silence, his fingers absently tracing the leather armrest as he gazed out at the passing scenery. The morning air was crisp and invigorating, carrying with it the promise of a new chapter in his life. As the car approached its destination, Keanu rolled down the window, allowing the fresh breeze to ruffle his hair. For over a decade he had owned this villa, yet it had remained a distant investment, a place he had only known through rental agreements and property management reports. As he sat there taking in the moment, the vibration of his phone interrupted his reverie. Keanu glanced at the screen, seeing a text from his assistant Patrick. With a slight smile, he tapped the call button, bringing the phone to his ear as Patrick's voice filled the car's interior. "Good morning, Keanu," Patrick said, his tone professional yet warm. There was a familiarity in his voice that spoke of years of working together, of a relationship that had grown beyond mere employer and employee. "I wanted to touch base with you about the villa. I instructed the maids to deep clean the house all week. It should be sparkling like a hotel by now." Keanu chuckled softly, appreciating Patrick's attention to detail. "Thanks, Patrick," he replied, his voice low and growly, "but you know I don't need it to feel like a hotel. I'm hoping it'll feel more like home." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Keanu could almost hear Patrick's knowing smile. "That's exactly what I meant," his assistant replied after a moment. "A comfortable place for you to stay these next few months until your current projects are done. I know how important it is for you to have a space that feels personal, not just another impersonal hotel suite." "I appreciate that," Keanu said, his voice sincere. He gazed out at the villa, trying to imagine what it would be like inside, how it would feel to make it his own space, even if only temporarily. Patrick hesitated for a moment before adding, "If you want, I can come to the villa. I could always be on standby if you need anything." "You No, I don't mind, and it might make the transition easier." Keanu shook his head. Even though Patrick couldn't see him, it was a kind offer, but Keanu had always valued his independence, even in the midst of the often chaotic world of Hollywood. "No need for that," he said gently. "I have a butler here and I can take care of matters myself, but thank you for the offer. It means a lot." "Keanu, you never change," Patrick said, his tone affectionate. There was a warmth in his voice that spoke of the deep respect and fondness he held for the actor. "Anyway, call me if you need anything at all, day or night. You know I'm here for you." As the call ended, Keanu found himself smiling. The car began to move again, approaching a set of ornate gates. With a soft hum, they swung open, granting access to the private driveway beyond. Keanu felt a small thrill of excitement as the car rolled onto his property. This was it, the moment he had been anticipating for weeks. The vehicle came to a smooth stop, and Keanu took a deep breath, centering himself before stepping out. As he emerged from the car, the full beauty of the villa revealed itself. The Mediterranean-inspired architecture was a stark contrast to the modern mansions that dominated much of Beverly Hills. Terracotta roof tiles gleamed in the morning sun, their warm hue complementing the creamy white of the stucco walls. Wrought iron balconies adorned with trailing vines added a touch of old-world charm, while large windows promised light-filled interiors. As he stood there taking in the sight of his long-owned but never inhabited home, a man in a crisp uniform approached. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and a posture that spoke of years of service in high-end households. "Welcome, Mr. Reeves," he said with a slight bow, his voice cultured and respectful. "I'm Malvin, your butler. The staff and I are delighted to have you here. The maids are ready to assist you with your luggage whenever you're ready to go inside." Keanu nodded in acknowledgement, appreciating Malvin's professional demeanor. However, the idea of immediately sequestering himself inside didn't appeal to him just yet. The morning was beautiful and he felt a desire to explore his surroundings a bit more. "Thank you, Mvin," Keanu replied, his voice warm. "I think I'd like to take a stroll around the neighborhood first while it's still cool. Could you have my bags taken to my room in the meantime and my clothes ironed and placed in the wardrobe?" "Of course," Mvin responded. Without missing a beat, he turned slightly Gesturing to the waiting staff who had been standing at a respectful distance, they immediately moved to the car, efficiently beginning to unload Keanu's luggage. As Keanu made his way towards the gate, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. This place, which had been nothing more than a line item in his portfolio for so long, was now to be his home for the next few months. He hoped that within its walls he would find not just luxury but the comfort and peace he sought. The thought both excited and slightly unnerved him. As Keanu walked, he allowed his mind to wander, contemplating the months ahead. He had chosen to stay here during the filming of his latest project, hoping the change of scenery would help him delve deeper into his character. The sound of a dog barking in the distance caught his attention, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a reminder that even in this seemingly perfect world, life with all its complexities and imperfections still existed. As Keanu approached the gate, his attention was drawn to a figure on the sidewalk just outside. A white man in his mid-50s, dressed in expensive loungewear and sporting wireless earbuds, was walking a young brown Ridgeback mix. The dog, a beautiful creature with a sleek coat and soft eyes, wore a collar that looked a bit too tight and a leash that seemed unnecessarily heavy for its size. As Keanu watched, the dog took a few tentative steps forward, its movements careful as if it were treading on eggshells. Then, perhaps driven by need or marking instinct, it lifted its leg to urinate on the gate. What happened next made Keanu's blood run cold. The man's face, which had been impassive moments before, suddenly contorted with anger. He yanked the dog's chain harshly, the force of it nearly lifting the animal off its feet. "Bad, stupid dog," he snarled, his voice loud enough to carry clearly to where Keanu stood. The venom in his tone was shocking, completely at odds with the peaceful morning and luxurious surroundings. "You never learn, do you? Filthy animal, no matter how many times I've taught you." The dog let out a pitiful whimper, a sound that tugged at Keanu's heart, its tail tucked between its legs, and it cowered, trying to make itself as small as possible. The man jerked the chain again, forcing the dog to stop midstream. For a horrifying moment it looked as if he might kick the animal, his foot lifting slightly off the ground. But then, as if sensing he was being watched, the man's eyes met Keanu's. The change that came over him was as sudden as it was unsettling. The anger vanished from his face, replaced by a warm, welcoming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His body language shifted from aggressive to open and friendly in the blink of an eye. "Well, hello there," he called out, his voice now warm and inviting, as if the outburst of moments ago had never happened. He tugged the dog along as he approached Keanu, his hand extended in greeting. "You must be the owner of this beautiful villa. I don't believe we've had the pleasure of meeting before." Keanu hesitated for a moment, the abrupt change in the man's behavior leaving him unsettled. Nevertheless, years of navigating Hollywood social circles had taught him to maintain his composure in even the most uncomfortable situations. He stepped forward, shaking the man's hand firmly. "Nice to meet you," Keanu said, his voice polite but reserved. "I'm Keanu Reeves." The man's eyes lit up with recognition, his smile widening. Of course. I've seen your films. Brilliant work, truly brilliant. I'm Graham Whitlock, been living in this neighborhood for 25 years now." He gestured expansively as if laying claim to the entire street. "Quite a community we have here." Keanu nodded, still processing the stark contrast between Graham's current friendliness and his earlier behavior towards the dog. His eyes flickered to the animal, which was now cowering behind Graham's legs, its body trembling slightly. Graham followed Keanu's gaze and let out a laugh that sounded forced. "Oh, don't mind old Rusty here.
They established a perimeter, photographing the container in situ before recovering it. They searched the immediate vicinity for any further evidence, a scrap of fabric, a blood trail, anything that might indicate the circumstances of the disappearance. But the trail vanished at that point. The severe storm damage had erased any footprints or other discernible signs of their subsequent movements. The wilderness had effectively cleaned the slate. The prevailing theories among the investigators centered on environmental factors. The most likely scenario was that Oki and Yumi were caught in the sudden onset of the storm. In the high-altitude environment, visibility would have dropped to zero almost instantly. They could have become disoriented, perhaps stepping off the trail and succumbing to hypothermia within hours. The catastrophic fall suggested by the location of the container remained a strong possibility. Wildlife attack, always a consideration in the Alaskan wilderness, was also explored. The area was home to brown bears and moose, both capable of lethal encounters. However, there was no evidence to support this theory. The scene was clean, undisturbed by the signs of a violent struggle. The disappearance seemed silent, a vanishing without a trace. As the weeks dragged on, the massive search effort yielded nothing further. The Alaskan summer is brief, and the approach of winter brought a new urgency. The temperatures dropped rapidly and the first snows began to dust the higher elevations. The window for searching was closing. The landscape was about to be sealed under a thick blanket of snow, hiding its secrets until the spring thaw. With no new leads and the environmental conditions deteriorating, the authorities made the difficult decision to scale back the active search. Yusuko Hamasaki protested, pleading for the search to continue. Convinced that Yumi and Oki might still be alive, perhaps injured, and sheltering in a cave or a ravine. But the reality of the situation was undeniable. The risk to the searchers was too great. The probability of success too low. The disappearance of Oki Koyamada and Yumi Hamasaki was officially classified as a tragic accident. 2 lives claimed by the indifferent wilderness. The case, lacking any evidence of foul play, slowly went cold, frozen under the accumulating layers of Alaskan snow. Etso returned to California, the silence of the Alaskan wilderness echoing in the sudden unbearable emptiness of her life. 9 years passed. The disappearance of the 2 botanists faded from the immediate consciousness of the Alaskan authorities, becoming another file in the cold case archives, a somber reminder of the wilderness's unforgiving nature. Yusuko Hamasaki continued to navigate a life defined by unresolved grief, the absence of her daughter, a constant aching void. The wilderness held its secrets, and the story of Oki and Yumi seemed destined to remain a mystery, swallowed by the vastness of the landscape.
Was doing, his face flushed with embarrassment, a stark contrast to the confident demeanor he had been projecting moments before. In an instant his hand tightened on the leash and he yanked it sharply. "Oh, I do apologize," Graham said, his voice strained with forced politeness. The sudden shift in his tone was jarring, a glimpse of the anger from earlier bleeding through his carefully maintained facade. "It seems Rusty here is being a bit naughty today." Kiana's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed the interaction more closely. What he saw disturbed him deeply. Rusty, already thin and nervous, seemed to shrink even further under Graham's harsh gaze. The dog's ribs were clearly visible through his coat, suggesting severe undernourishment. Patches of fur were missing in places, hinting at possible skin conditions or stress-related hair loss. But it was Rusty's overall demeanor that truly broke Kiana's heart. The dog's legs trembled, seeming barely able to support its weight. Everything about Rusty's posture screamed fear. Head held low, tail tucked tightly between its legs, ears pressed flat against its skull. This wasn't just a nervous rescue dog, this was an animal living in constant terror. Graham, noticing Kiana's concerned gaze, quickly interjected, his voice taking on a tone of exaggerated concern. "I suppose it's time for me to get this dirty beast home for a bath," he said, his words light but with an undercurrent of tension. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Kiana. Welcome to the neighborhood." As Graham turned to leave, tugging Rusty along behind him, Kiana couldn't help but speak up. The actor had always been known for his kindness and compassion, and the sight of Rusty's obvious distress was more than he could bear in silence. "Is everything all right with your dog?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the concern churning in his gut. "He looks a bit unwell. I have a friend who's a vet if you need a recommendation." Graham's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly, a flash of something anger, fear crossing his face before it was quickly masked by his practiced charm. "Oh, that's very kind of you, but Rusty is just fine," he said, his words coming out smoothly as if he'd rehearsed them many times before. "You see, he's a rescue dog. The shelter provided full vaccinations, of course, but he's still adjusting to his new home." Kiana nodded slowly, not entirely convinced by Graham's elaborate explanation. He had known many rescue dogs in his life, and while adjustment periods were common, the level But fear and physical neglect he was seeing in Rusty seemed far beyond normal. Graham, perhaps sensing Kiana's skepticism, quickly launched into more detail. "We're working on helping him gain some weight," he continued, his voice taking on a confiding tone, "and he's still getting used to the neighborhood. You know how it is with these problematic breeds. It takes time and patience." Before Kiana could press further, Graham suddenly changed the subject, his voice becoming animated. "Say, I almost forgot we're having our neighborhood's 75th anniversary celebration at my house soon. You simply must come," he said, his tone enthusiastic. "We'll have activities for children, dog competitions, door prizes, the works. It's scheduled between 11 a.m. and lunch. All the neighbors will be there." The sudden shift in conversation left Kiana slightly off balance. He found himself nodding automatically, his mind still processing the disturbing scene he had witnessed and the inconsistencies in Graham's story. "That sounds interesting," Kiana managed, forcing a polite smile. "I'm having a scheduled meeting this afternoon, but I appreciate the invitation," as Graham bid farewell and walked away, tugging Rusty along behind him. Kiana couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. The discrepancy between Graham's public persona as a mindfulness expert and his treatment of the dog was stark and troubling. As he turned to head back into his villa, Kiana's mind was already forming connections, piecing together the reality behind Graham's carefully maintained image. The peaceful morning that had greeted Kiana upon his arrival at Silverwood Estate now felt tainted. The beauty of his surroundings seemed somehow diminished, overshadowed by the glimpse of cruelty he had witnessed. As he walked back towards his villa, Kiana found himself lost in thought, wondering what other secrets might be hiding behind the perfectly manicured lawns and gleaming facades of this exclusive neighborhood. Kiana stepped into his villa, the cool interior a welcome reset from the morning sun and the unsettling encounter outside. As the door closed behind him, he noticed with approval that the butler and maids were no longer hovering around the entrance, giving him the space he preferred. It was a small detail, but one that spoke volumes about their professionalism and understanding of his desire for privacy. As his eyes adjusted to the dimmer light inside, Kiana took in the details of the interior, silently appreciating how well Patrick had instructed the team in getting every detail right. The space felt lived in rather than sterile, with personal touches that made it feel more like a home than a rental property. In the spacious living room, family photos in vintage frames adorned the walls instead of generic decorative pieces. Kiana moved closer to examine them, a small smile playing on his lips as he recognized moments from his childhood and early career. There was a photo of him with his sisters, their young faces beaming at the camera. Another showed him on the set of one of his first films, looking nervous but determined. These weren't just any photos, they were carefully chosen moments from his life, placed here to make the space feel truly his. The furniture was arranged to encourage conversation rather than formal entertaining, with comfortable-looking sofas and armchairs grouped intimately around a low coffee table. Kiana ran his hand along the back of a leather armchair, feeling the soft, worn texture beneath his fingers. It wasn't new, but it was well cared for, the kind of peace that invited you to sink into it. With a good book, large windows stood open to the morning breeze, and wooden ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, creating a gentle cross breeze that was far more inviting than the harsh chill of air conditioning. The sound of rustling leaves from the garden outside added to the peaceful atmosphere, a stark contrast to the tension Kiana had felt during his encounter with Graham. As he moved through the space, Kiana noticed other thoughtful touches. A guitar stand in the corner held one of his favorite instruments, ready for him to pick up and play whenever the mood struck. A small writing desk near the window was stocked with his preferred brand of notebooks and pens, perfect for jotting down script ideas or personal reflections. Kiana made his way to the kitchen, drawn by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The space was a perfect blend of modern functionality and homey charm. Stainless steel appliances gleamed, but they were offset by warm wooden countertops, and a rustic farmhouse sink. A bowl of fresh fruit sat on the island, and Kiana helped himself to an apple, savoring the crisp sweetness as he continued his exploration. As he approached the bar area, considering whether to pour himself a gin and tonic, a maid appeared carrying a tall glass of green juice. Kiana couldn't help but smile at the sight of the precisely mixed combination of kale, spinach, apple, cucumber, and lime, another testament to Patrick's attention to detail in briefing the staff about his preferences. "Thank you," Kiana said warmly, taking the glass from her. "This is perfect." The maid smiled and nodded before quietly excusing herself, leaving Kiana alone once again. He took a sip of the juice, savoring the familiar taste. It helped to settle the unease that had been growing in him since his encounter with Graham and Rusty. As he sipped his juice, Kiana's eyes fell on the giant minimalist clock on the wall. 9:30 a.m. He had some time before his scheduled meeting and he decided to use it to relax and acclimate to his new surroundings. Settling onto the couch, Keanu pulled out his phone to check his emails. The quiet of the house enveloped him, broken only by the soft whir of the ceiling fans and the occasional distant bird call from the garden. For a moment he allowed himself to relax, thinking that perhaps staying here for the next 3 months wouldn't be so bad after all. He had never lived in this house before, always renting it out, and now he had the chance to truly enjoy it. Just as he was beginning to lose himself in his correspondence, a sound cut through his concentration, a high-pitched whimper followed by a pain-filled howl. The noise carried clearly despite the distance between properties, suggesting significant distress. Keanu's head snapped up, his body tensing. The peaceful atmosphere of moments ago shattered, replaced by a sense of urgency and concern. He set his phone and juice aside, rising to his feet. In one fluid motion, the sound had been is documented in our rental records. Keanu's frown deepened as he processed this information. It aligned all too well with the rehearsed story Graham had given him earlier. And the neighbors, how do they react to this? Melvin's expression turned grim. Mr. Whitlock is something of a self-appointed neighborhood leader. His wealth and connections make others reluctant to challenge him. Most prefer to look the other way, I'm afraid. Affid, what about you, Mvin? Keanu asked, his voice soft but intense. Do you think Graham takes proper care of that dog? Melvin shook his head slowly, his professional demeanor cracking further to reveal genuine distress. All the staff knows that man is rude even toward his own employees. His behavior, it's at odds with the image he projects publicly. The way he speaks to his household staff, the way he treats that poor animal, it's not right, sir. Keanu nodded, processing this information. It confirmed his worst suspicions and strengthened his resolve to do something about the situation. Thank you, Mvin. This has been very helpful. I need to get ready now. I'll be attending the event next door. Very good, sir, Melvin replied, his composure regained. All your clothes have been ironed and placed in your wardrobe. Is there anything else you need? Keanu shook his head, already formulating his next move. No thank you, Melvin, that will be all for now. As he climbed the stairs to his room, Keanu's mind was working overtime. He carefully selected his attire, casual enough for a neighborhood gathering but allowing for ease of movement if intervention became necessary. He reviewed the event timing in his head, considering how to best position himself to gather evidence of any mistreatment while maintaining his cover story. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and Keanu was more determined than ever to uncover the truth and, if necessary, save Rusty from his abusive situation. As he adjusted his collar in the mirror, his expression was one of grim determination. Whatever happened at this neighborhood event, he would be ready. The stakes were high, and Keanu knew that his actions could have far-reaching consequences, but as he thought of Rusty's frightened eyes and trembling form, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. With a deep breath, he steeled himself for what was to come, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in his quest to bring justice and safety to a helpless animal. At precisely 11 a.m., Keanu found himself walking towards Graham's mansion. The morning sun had grown stronger, casting long shadows across the immaculate lawns and gleaming driveways of Silverwood Estate. As he passed the spot where Rusty had been forced to hold his urination earlier, a wave of sympathy washed over him. He could only imagine the desperation the poor animal must have felt to be yanked away midstream and then resort to relieving itself in Keanu's yard. The closer he got to Graham's property, the more elaborate the decorations became, colorful banners proclaiming 75.
The timeline was shattered. The realization transformed the investigation. It meant that the skull must have become entangled in the antler recently, within the last 6 to 8 months. This realization posed a central, baffling question. If Oki died in 2007, where was her skull for the intervening 8 years? And how, after all that time, did it end up on a moose antler in 2016? The investigation shifted focus. It meant that Oki's remains had been resting somewhere else undisturbed for 8 years before being disturbed and picked up by the moose in 2016. The location where the moose was found might not be the location where Oki died. The moose could have traveled miles from the site of the entanglement. The investigators analyzed the entanglement itself in light of this new information. The skull was firmly lodged. The biologists suggested that the entanglement might have occurred when the antler was still growing and softer during the velvet stage. Perhaps the skull became embedded in the soft cartilage and the antler tissue grew around it, hardening into bone and securing the skull in place. This would explain the firmness of the connection, but it also suggested a very specific window of time during the spring or early summer when the entanglement occurred. Theories began to circulate attempting to explain this bizarre phenomenon. Had Oki's body been preserved in ice or a glacier for years, only recently exposed by thawing? This was a possibility in the Alaskan wilderness where climate change was rapidly altering the landscape, exposing long frozen remains. If her remains had been washed out of the ice, they could have been deposited in an area accessible to the moose. Another theory was more sinister. Had the scene been staged? Had someone found Oki's remains and deliberately attached them to the moose? This seemed highly unlikely given the difficulty of approaching a wild bull moose, especially during the antler growth phase when they are particularly sensitive. Furthermore, the entanglement appeared organic, albeit bizarre, with the bone structure suggesting the antler had grown around the skull. To solve the mystery, investigators needed to determine where the moose had been during the spring and summer of 2016. They needed to backtrack the animal's movements, not just over days or weeks, but over the entire growth cycle of the antler. Traditional search methods were insufficient. The investigation required a breakthrough, a way to read the history recorded in the bone of the antler itself. The wilderness held secrets, and it seemed determined to reveal them in the most bizarre and unsettling ways. The realization that Oki Kyomata's skull had only recently become attached to the moose antler presented a unique and daunting investigative challenge. The location where Garrick Ryland found the moose was likely irrelevant to the location of Oki's death, or the place where her remains had rested undisturbed for 8 years.
Him was staggering. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Kiana decided to probe further, hoping to understand the depths of Graham's deception. If you don't have the commitment to take care of a dog, why did you adopt him in the first place? Keanu asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. He was acutely aware of Rusty cowering behind him, the dog's fear palpable presence in the secluded side garden. Graham's face twisted into a sneer, all pretense of civility abandoned. It wasn't my idea, he said, dismissively waving a hand as if brushing away an annoying insect. My young daughter begged for a dog. She wanted some cute expensive breed like a golden retriever, but I saw an opportunity. Keanu raised an eyebrow, silently urging Graham to continue. The sounds of the party in the main backyard tiled through the shrubs, creating a surreal backdrop to their intense conversation. I chose a rescue, Graham explained, his tone matter of fact, as if discussing a business transaction rather than a living, feeling creature. It was perfect for my image. I was working on my new book, doing interviews, having a rescue dog with me everywhere. It portrayed me as altruistic and compassionate. The PR works and the media ate it up. Kiana felt a wave of disgust wash over him. So Rusty was just a prop for your public relations, he asked, his voice low and filled with barely contained anger. Graham shrugged, seemingly unaffected by Kiana's obvious disgust. I never liked it personally, he continued, his eyes cold as he looked at Rusty, those sad eyes, that lean frame, that unpolished appearance. It has so much trauma. It was a burden to train, disobedient from day one. Rusty has soulful eyes, Kiana countered, his voice soft but firm. He turned slightly, looking at the trembling dog behind him. He's lovely, and with your resources you could easily hire a trainer to help with any behavioral issues. Why waste money on an ungrateful dog? Graham scoffed, his voice filled with contempt. It's not like it's a human child, it's just an animal. The pieces fell into place in Kiana's mind, painting a picture of neglect and cruelty that made his stomach churn. So that's how Rusty became malnourished, he said, his voice filled with quiet anger. Neglect, minimal food and water, and I'm guessing the occasional physical punishment when he misbehaved. Graham's silence was all the confirmation Kiana needed. The self-help guru's face was a mask of defiance, daring Kiana to challenge him further. This has to end now, Kiana declared, his voice firm and unwavering. There's no way I'm letting Rusty participate in that obstacle course spectacle you've set up. It's cruel and inhumane. To Kiana's surprise, Graham laughed. It was a cold, mirthless sound that seemed to hang in the air of the secluded garden. You're taking this far too seriously, he said, attempting to ease the tension with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. It's not a championship event, just entertainment. Who cares if the dog wins or not? The children and neighbors love it. Kiana's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching at Graham's casual dismissal of Rusty's suffering. If you go through with this, I'll expose you to all the other neighbors, he threatened, his voice low and intense. They'll see what you're really doing to Rusty. Your carefully crafted image will crumble. Graham's laughter grew louder, more mocking. Go ahead, he challenged, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of false invitation. They all know they stay silent because of my influence. They all love me. His voice took on a cruel edge as he continued, a dog is just a dog, Kiana. It's not as precious as human life. They are the lowly beings of the universe's creation. Kiana looked around, suddenly aware of how close they were to the main party. He could hear the murmur of conversations and the clink of glasses just beyond the shrubs. He realized with a sinking feeling that Graham might be right. How many of those smiling, well-dressed neighbors had turned a blind eye to Rusty's suffering? How many had chosen their social standing over the welfare Of a helpless animal, see, Graham said triumphantly, noticing Kiana's moment of doubt. What did I tell you? In this world, influence and image are everything, and I have both in spades. In that moment, Kiana realized the full extent of the situation. It wasn't just Graham who was complicit in Rusty's abuse. The entire neighborhood had turned a blind eye, prioritizing their social standing over the welfare of a helpless animal. The realization made him feel sick, but it also strengthened his resolve. Knowing he couldn't rely on local support, Kiana made a snap decision. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911, hoping that law enforcement might be able to intervene where the neighborhood had failed. But as he explained the situation to the dispatcher, his heart sank. Without concrete evidence of abuse, they couldn't intervene immediately. The call ended fruitlessly, leaving Kiana feeling more alone than ever in his fight for Rusty. Graham's smug expression only fueled Kiana's determination. This is a joke, Graham said, waving his hand dismissively. A waste of my time. If you like the dog so much, just take the filthy animal and go. I'd be glad to get rid of it now that I no longer need it for PR. Kiana stared at Graham, disgust and resolve wearing within him. He knew that simply taking Rusty wouldn't be enough. Graham needed to face consequences for his actions, but for now, getting Rusty to safety had to be the priority. This isn't over, Kiana promised, his voice low and intense. I will make sure you face justice for what you've done to this helpless animal. Your days of hiding behind your reputation are numbered. Graham's laughter rang out once more, echoing in the confined space of the side garden. Try your best, he taunted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. You might be a celebrity, but you're not the only rich person in this neighborhood. Better preserve that reputation of yours carefully, Kiana. You never know what kind of stories might start circulating. Kiana's reply was calm but filled with conviction. Yes, I'm preserving my reputation by staying true to myself. Make sure you become what you teach, Graham, or very soon people will start to see through the cracks in your facade. As Kiana bent down to remove Rusty's metal chain, replacing it with the rope leash he had in his pocket, he was acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. He was challenging not just Graham but an entire system that allowed such cruelty to exist behind closed doors. With Rusty trotting loyally at his side, Kiana strode past Graham and through the thick shrubs into the expansive backyard. The bright sunlight greeted them, along with the lively hum of the party still in full swing. Kiana felt the weight of the guests' stares, their eyes tracking his every move. Whispers flitted behind hands discreetly covering mouths, a faint murmur of judgment and curiosity as he exited through the gate with Rusty there. Retreat became a quiet indictment, a poignant reminder of the moral void in a community that had willfully chosen to ignore what was right. With Rusty at his side, Kiana made his way back to the villa with determined strides. The dog's unsteady steps spoke volumes about the neglect and abuse he had suffered. Unable to bear it any longer, Kananu scooped Rusty into his arms, feeling the frail weight of his burden. His thoughts raced with urgency. Rusty needed immediate attention, but beyond that, he required a lasting solution to secure his safety and nurture his recovery. Kananu resolved then and there to give the dog the care and protection he had been so cruelly denied. As they approached Kiana's property, he could feel his hesitation. The dog had likely never known kindness from humans, and every step away from his former prison was both a relief and a source of anxiety. Kiana spoke softly to him, offering reassurances with every step. It's okay, Rusty, he murmured, his voice gentle and soothing. You're safe now, no one's going to hurt you anymore. They entered the villa, the cool interior a stark contrast to the heated confrontation they had just left. The butler and staff looked up in surprise, their eyes widening at the sight of the malnourished dog beside their employer. To their credit, they quickly composed themselves, ready to assist. Mr. Reeves, Malvin said, stepping forward with a mixture of concern and curiosity on his face. Is everything all right? Can we be of assistance? Kiana nodded, grateful for the butler's professionalism. Yes, Mvin, I need your help. Could you please have one of the maids fill a bathtub with warm water, not too hot, just comfortably warm? Malvin nodded, immediately turning to instruct one of the maids. Kiana then addressed him directly again. I also need you to go to the nearest pet store. We need dog shampoo, lice treatment and grooming tools, and some high-quality dog food, something easily digestible for a dog that's been malnourished. Take the chauffeur with you. Speed is of the essence. Malvin's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't question the unusual request. Of course, sir, I'll leave right away. Is there anything else you need? Kiana thought for a moment. Yes, actually, could you also pick up a soft dog bed and some gentle toys? Nothing too stimulating for now, just something comforting. Certainly, Mr. Reeves, I'll take care of it immediately, Melvin replied, already moving towards the door. As Malvin rushed out, Kiana gently guided Rusty further into the house. The dog's eyes edged around nervously, unused to such a clean and spacious environment. Every new sight and smell seemed to overwhelm him, and he pressed close to Kiana's leg, seeking reassurance. It's okay, Rusty, Kiana said softly, crouching down to the dog's level. You're safe here. While waiting for the supplies and the bath to be prepared, Kiana pulled out his phone once more. This time he dialed a different number. One belonging to his friend Martin, who owned an animal shelter. Martin, Kiana said as soon as the call connected, "I need your help. I've just rescued a severely neglected dog from an abusive situation." As Kiana explained the situation, Martin listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification or offering words of support. When Kiana finished, Martin's voice was filled with both concern and determination. "Bring Rusty over whenever you have the chance," he said. "The sooner the better. We'll give him all the care and attention he needs. I'll have our vet on standby to do a full checkup." "Thank you," Kiana replied, relief evident in his voice. "I'll drive him over tomorrow morning. I want to let him rest today and start the process of cleaning him up. Is that okay?" "That's a good plan," Martin agreed. "Just be careful not to overwhelm him. Everything is new and potentially frightening for him right now. Go slow and let him set the pace." They discussed the immediate care Rusty would need, with Martin offering advice on feeding and comfort. "Don't let him eat or drink too much at once," he cautioned. "His stomach won't be used to it. He needs to gain weight gradually. Small, frequent meals are best for now." They ended the call with a mutual understanding, Martin thanking Kiana for saving Rusty and promising to take good care of him when Kiana brings him to the shelter. As Kiana put his phone away, he felt a sense of relief. With Martin's help, Rusty would have the professional care he needed to recover fully. A maid appeared to inform him that the bath was ready. Almost simultaneously, Mvin returned with the supplies from the pet store. The butler's arms were laden with bags containing everything Kiana had requested and more. "Shall I bathe the dog, sir?" Melvin offered, setting down the bags. "Or perhaps one of the staff could attend to it." Kiana shook his head, a small smile on his face. "No thank you, Melvin. I'll do it myself. Rusty needs to learn to trust humans again, and I want to be part of that process." With gentle coaxing, Kiana led Rusty to the bathroom. The dog was hesitant at first, clearly unfamiliar with such kind treatment, but as Kiana spoke softly and moved slowly, Rusty began to relax slightly. The bathroom was warm, the large tub filled with comfortably warm water. Kiana had made sure it wasn't too deep, just enough to clean Rusty without frightening him. Carefully, he helped Rusty into the water. The dog tensed and trembled at first, but as Kiana's hands moved gently over his fur, applying the shampoo and working out the tangles, Rusty began to lean into the touch. As he worked, Kiana found himself talking to Rusty, explaining what he was doing and promising a better future. "You're safe now, buddy," he murmured. "No one's going to hurt you again. We're going to get you healthy and find you a loving home. You'll never have to be afraid again." The process was long and meticulous. Kiana took care to be gentle around the areas where Rusty showed signs of pain or discomfort. He carefully applied the lice treatment, grimacing at the evidence of neglect but determined to give Rusty a fresh start. By the time the bath was over, Rusty looked noticeably better. His fur, though still thin in places, was clean and free of tangles, but more importantly, there was a new light in his eyes, a tentative trust beginning to form. As Kiana dried Rusty off with a soft towel, he felt a surge of protectiveness. This wasn't just about exposing Graham's cruelty or making a point about animal welfare. It was about giving this innocent creature a chance at the life he deserved, a life full of love, care and safety. With Rusty clean and dry, Kiana led him to the living room where Melvin had set up the new dog bed. It was plush and comfortable, placed in a quiet corner where Rusty could feel secure. Beside it was a bowl of fresh water and a small portion of the high-quality dog food Melvin had purchased. Rusty approached the bed cautiously, sniffing it with interest. With a little encouragement from Kiana, he finally stepped onto it, turning in a circle before settling down. The look of contentment on his face as he sank into the soft material was heartwarming, and Kiana sat on the floor beside the bed, gently stroking Rusty's head. "You did great today, buddy," he said softly. "Tomorrow we'll go see my friend Martin. He's going to help you get healthy and strong, and I promise you, Rusty, I'm going to make sure you never have to go back to that place again." As the afternoon wore on, Kiana remained by Rusty's side, offering comfort and reassurance. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, not just for Rusty's recovery but in bringing Graham to justice and exposing the complicity of the Silverwood Estate community. But as he watched Rusty slowly relax into nap, Kiana knew that every effort would be worth it. This was just the beginning of Rusty's journey to recovery, and Kiana was committed to seeing it through. The peaceful retreat he had envisioned when coming to Silverwood Estate had turned into something far more meaningful, a mission.
They had been caught in the storm, their gear insufficient for the intensity of the weather. They were off route, having deviated from the high-altitude ridge in a desperate attempt to find shelter. They were on the verge of collapse. Bledsoe stated that he offered them assistance, guiding them to his cabin. They were grateful, relieved to be out of the storm. He provided them with food and warmth, playing the role of the savior. But Bledsoe admitted that his motivations changed rapidly. He was a solitary man, isolated from society for long periods. The presence of the two women in his cabin triggered a dark impulse. He felt entitled after rescuing them, a sense of ownership over them. He decided he wanted Yumi. Later that evening, as the storm raged outside, he made advances toward her. Yumi resisted, rejecting him forcefully. Enraged by her rejection and emboldened by their isolation, Bledsoe assaulted her. Oki intervened, fighting desperately to protect her friend. A violent struggle ensued in the cramped confines of the cabin. During the chaos, Oki managed to break free. She fled the cabin, disappearing into the raging storm, into the darkness and the howling wind. Bledsoe did not pursue her. He made a calculated decision. He was confident that she would not survive. The wilderness and the weather, coupled with her weakened state and lack of gear, would quickly kill her. He assumed her remains would be scattered by the elements, never to be found. He let the wilderness dispose of the witness. With Oki gone, Bledsoe turned his attention back to Yumi. He confessed to holding her captive in the cabin for several weeks. The details of her captivity were horrific. He subjected her to repeated abuse, physical and psychological torture. He broke her spirit, asserting his dominance over her, isolated from the world with no hope of rescue. Yumi's fate was sealed when she attempted to fight back. Several weeks into her captivity, she managed to free herself from her restraints and attacked Bledsoe, desperate to escape. He overpowered her again, and in a fit of rage, he murdered her. He confessed to burying her body near the cabin in a concealed location designed to remain undisturbed. He then meticulously cleaned the cabin, hiding their gear beneath the floorboards, erasing any trace of their presence, returning to his solitary life as if nothing had happened. The confession provided the answers the investigators had sought for 9 years. It was a horrific account of opportunistic violence, a predator taking advantage of a situation created by the unforgiving environment. However, when pressed about the discovery of Oki's skull on the moose antler, Bledsoe's demeanor changed again. He vehemently denied any involvement in the entanglement. He insisted he never saw Oki again after she fled the cabin. He claimed he had no idea how her skull ended up on the moose antler 9 years later. The investigators were skeptical. They suspected that Bledsoe might be withholding information, perhaps reluctant to admit to a detail so grotesque and bizarre. They theorized that he might have found Oki's remains years later and staged the scene, a sick trophy of his crime. But Bledsoe maintained his denial, his voice firm and unwavering on this specific point. The mechanism of the antler entanglement remained a mystery, a final unresolved detail in a case defined by its bizarre circumstances. The confession, however, was enough. It provided the location of Yumi's remains and the evidence needed to secure a conviction. Following Wyatt Bledsoe's chilling confession, the investigation moved swiftly toward its conclusion. Guided by the details provided by Bledsoe, investigators returned to the remote valley and the unmapped cabin. The focus shifted from investigation to recovery. They focused their search on the area surrounding the structure, looking for the concealed burial site he had described. The terrain was difficult and the burial site was well hidden, covered by years of accumulated debris and vegetation. But with the precise location identified, the specialized team managed to locate the site. They began the meticulous process of excavation. The atmosphere somber as they uncovered the remains hidden beneath the soil. The remains were recovered and transported to the medical examiner's office. Forensic analysis confirmed the identity. Yumi Hamasaki. After 9 years of agonizing uncertainty, Etsu Hamasaki finally had confirmation of her daughter's fate. The news was devastating. The details of Yumi's captivity and murder almost unbearable. But it provided the closure she had desperately sought, the ability to finally mourn her daughter and bring her remains home. The legal process against Wyatt Bledsoe proceeded quickly. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, including his own confession and the discovery of Yumi's remains, Bledsoe chose to plead guilty, avoiding a trial that would have forced the families to relive the horrific details of the crime. In 2018, Wyatt Bledsoe was convicted of the kidnapping and murder of Yumi Hamasaki and charges related to the kidnapping of Oki Koyamada. He received a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. Extensive searches were conducted in the area surrounding the cabin, attempting to locate the rest of Oki Koyama's remains. The searches failed to find anything further. Authorities concluded that Oki perished in the wilderness shortly after her escape in 2007, succumbing to the storm and the harsh environment. Her remains were likely scattered by scavengers and the elements over the intervening years. The mechanism by which her skull ended up on the moose antler 9 years later remains an enduring mystery. Whether it was a freak natural occurrence, perhaps her remains were unearthed by erosion, or a landslide, and the moose thrashing its newly grown antlers against the ground became violently entangled. Or a gruesome detail that Wyatt Bledsoe refused to admit, the truth remains unknown. The bizarre discovery that broke the case wide open ultimately remained the one detail that defied explanation.